Hey everyone, welcome to Not Your Average Bucket List. We are on season 2, Local Lore and Legends. Today we have an exclusive interview with Heather of Small Town Monsters. Heather, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
So, just to preface, why don't you tell us a little bit about your involvement in the cryptid community and maybe your own origin story into all things cryptid?
Okay. Well, I am a producer and researcher for Small Town Monsters. We make cryptid documentaries. I guess not just cryptids. We talk about UFOs a little bit too, but focus on the effects of these particular stories on the community, as well as the history behind the stories, and then of course told through eyewitness words primarily. So I am a writer as well. I have a couple articles out I have one in volume 1 of the Feminine Macabre, which is an all female journal, and one in volume 3, and then another one coming out in volume 5. Let's see. I had a podcast, which we're hoping to get restarted again soon, called The Lore You Know.
Oh,
Like the more you know, you remember it's
Yeah,
like the lore
I
you
love it.
know, but with a UFO over the
Oh,
over
that's
the
great.
phrase, uh, where I would interview just really awesome people that are collecting folklore
Mhm,
because I find that incredibly inspiring and important.
mhm.
So, yeah, that's what I do right now. As far as my origin story, I mean, I don't know how many people are familiar with Carrollton, Ohio, in Carroll
I
County.
definitely am, yeah.
Yeah, this super small but where I grew up, I mean, there were always stories about Bigfoot around, and it's not that far from Minerva, which is the famous Minerva monster sighting, which
Mhm.
I actually didn't grow up knowing about the Minerva monster. That was later, after finding out about small town monsters, that I paid
Yeah,
attention to that. But Bigfoot was not a stranger as far as that goes for the way that I was raised, and obviously, Unsolved Mysteries brought me into
mm.
the fold with weirdness. And I just,
absolutely.
yeah, I've kind of always been there since then. So Unsolved Mysteries got me started. And I don't know, my parents being pretty open about odd things, like not shutting that idea down, I think was also key. And then I went off to college and studied classical studies, Latin literature, things like that.
Hmm.
Mythology was my favorite when it came to all of that stuff. And then when I graduated, did the adjunct thing for a while, and then Small Town Monsters came along, and it all kind of meshed together because I was already doing research on cursed objects,
Hmm.
and that fit well with the Bell Witch that they were getting ready to film. So
Mm.
that's kind of how that all panned out there.
Very cool.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
have a large scope of knowledge and experience. That's fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're gonna dive into just some lightning questions,
Oh,
just that,
yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
just so I tried to think outside the box for these. So no pressure or anything. You don't have
Okay.
to rush through them, but okay,
Okay.
we're gonna start off with an easy one. Out of all the cryptids that you've researched, which one do you believe is most likely to be real?
Bigfoot
Yeah.
would most likely be real. Yeah. It'd be
Okay.
Sasquatch.
Any reason why in particular?
Aside from personal experience here at at the house,
Ooh.
um, which I haven't had any sightings here, but Seth has when we were filming here
I
Did we
know, I
lose
think
her?
we lost
a
her for a
little
bit.
over a
No.
Hold
year
on.
ago. Uh-oh, did I lose you?
Yeah,
Oh,
just briefly.
Okay.
okay, you're back.
So, we actually filmed a YouTube series here where I live called The Bigfoot Project, and Seth had a sighting while we were filming. I
Really?
unfortunately was not with him at the time, um, because I was
Oh,
back at
no.
the house watching the kids. But anyway, uh, I still had things happen. That was the whole reason Seth was out here, was there was activity occurring. So I've heard them run around. They've thrown rocks. They've I guess you would call it gifting, but it wasn't an intentional gifting situation. In that when we first moved here, I had gone out in the woods and I hid, like I collect crystals and rocks and things like that. My desk is just full of them from all over. And when we first moved here, I took a handful of crystals and I went and I hid them through the woods because I thought when my kids get older, they'll just come across them
Oh,
and
that's
how cool will that
great.
be to find, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So after some activity had started, I just went out to check where all my crystals were to look at them again and see what ones I hadn't put out yet. And one of them was gone, and in its place was a vertebrae. I'm guessing it's a deer vertebrae.
Oh
Um,
my goodness. So they're
yeah,
like big crows making big crow
yeah,
sounds.
yeah. And I took it, I picked it up, and called Seth, and then he immediately was like, "Why did you pick it up? There could have been like DNA on it. Like you should have."
Oh man.
But anyway, they eventually brought that crystal back. It was about a month later, and they put it back in the same spot, but it was all muddy. It's just weird. But anyway, so I would
Wow.
say that just because of personal experiences, the sheer number of accounts, and I guess if you want to look at biologically what would be probably the most likely,
Right.
Yeah.
that over something like, and I'm not saying that any of the cryptids are not real in some capacity, but
Sure.
like I don't know, Mothman or something, like
Right.
uh
Yeah.
this winged humanoid. I'm not saying that those don't exist because I believe that people have seen something.
Yeah.
Right.
But when we just go from a purely scientific standpoint, to me, like an ape in the woods makes a lot more sense. So,
Absolutely. Yeah. So one question. So living, in the foothills of Appalachia, having sightings, having
yeah.
activity, do you have house rules like kids? Get inside by a certain hour, don't leave, food outside. What are the rules?
Well, the only rule about food outside is, bring the cat food in so that the possums and the raccoons don't eat it and then
Yeah,
tear
fair
things
enough.
apart. But when it comes to other rules of being outside, there really aren't any other than, I mean, if you feel like something isn't safe, like if you suddenly get this overwhelming feeling that I'm not okay, listen
Yeah.
to that. Come home.
Yeah.
Mm.
uh,
Yep. Don't be
so
afraid to be silly and just run back. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. They haven't really had any issues. Now, if we had like, we do have coyotes everywhere, but they don't really come out to the evening, and usually by dark the kids aren't out anyway.
Yeah.
Um, or if they are, I'm with them.
Yeah.
But if we had, I mean, like if I was aware that there was a bear in the area, which is completely feasible, then maybe I'd be a little more concerned. But I also think with something like, if Bigfoot is going to hang around and he wanted to do something, I feel like he would have already done it. I don't feel like
Fair
he's
enough.
gonna hang
Yeah.
out for like 3 years and then all of a sudden snatch up one of the kids. Like,
Mm.
now's the perfect time. I got him feeling
Right.
comfortable.
Yeah.
Um, so
Oh,
yeah,
you're
that
braver
hasn't
than
been
I
as
am.
much of a
Like usually
concern.
I don't mind that kind of stuff, but if I'm, out in the country and I know there's a large animal around, especially something maybe that's Bigfoot, I don't think I would be leisurely strolling at dusk through the
Same.
woods. So,
Same. No.
Most of the stuff that you're gonna see here at dusk when you stroll around, though, are just deer that you scare and kick up, and
look,
you know.
deer I almost hit 2 today already. So it's, just too
No.
many.
No. I feel like we also talked about that when we were for our New Jersey episode, the Jersey Devil, which
Mhm.
Sarah sent me this link to an Airbnb in the Pine Barrens and I was like, "No, I would never stay there. Why would this? No, absolutely not."
Well, yeah, I wouldn't go to the Pine Barrens by myself and stay
Right.
somewhere. We went to the Pine Barrens last summer. It was a very quick drive to wrap up our Jersey Devil dock. Um, and we drove through the Pine Barrens a little bit, and it's so massive
Yeah.
Mhm.
and so
Yeah.
isolated. And if it's true, I mean, I'm assuming that this is true, that if people just end up murdered out there, or it's a great place to take people out to kill them, it makes sense because
Mm.
Right.
it's so huge. There's no way that they could constantly be patrolling that area.
Right.
But here at home, I'm familiar with the woods here, so
Yes.
that's fine. But I'm not going to go out, like we're getting ready to go to British Columbia. You're not going to catch me out in the woods there by myself. Or when we went to Alaska, that wasn't happening because
Oh,
I had no
especially
desire to
not.
be
Yeah.
taken by a bear or mountain lion or
Right.
anything
Yeah.
like that.
It's not just the cryptids or creatures. It's legitimately
Yeah,
bear or people or hunters out. That's
right.
just
Oh,
yep.
the people scare me the most. If I were to go out here in the
Yep.
woods, and we've got like there's around 300 acres around here. If I were to go in the
Oh
woods and
yeah.
there's another human, I want to like I know
I
what
don't
I'm
like that.
doing. What are they
Yeah.
doing? Like
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm usually alone. If you're here, why?
yeah,
There
Right.
was
yeah,
I grew up in the country and we had some acreage, and my grandpa would allow hunters to come set up blinds and things. But sometimes they wouldn't follow the rules. They wouldn't let us know. And they would just be in the woods in their little shacks. And no, I don't like that.
Nope. Not for me. That's way too scary. So okay, if you had to be a cryptid for a year, which one would you choose?
a cryptid for a year. Okay. Well, shoot. That's a very interesting question. I do you go with the one that you could just terrify people for fun?
Interesting.
I don't know. Like I don't know if I'd want to be a cryptid. Although it might not be so bad because you're not going to be found. So it'd be a
It's true.
year off from
Yeah. It's like a
I love
relaxation
this
retreat.
logic.
yeah. It'd be a year off from responsibilities and
Ooh.
people. So I don't know. I guess I don't know. That's so different than like what's your favorite cryptid? Because I'd be like, oh, my favorite cryptid is whatever, but I don't want to be that cryptid.
Sure.
I have no idea. I have never
Okay.
considered that.
Interesting.
I'd rather be like a ghost or something, I think, than
That
a
would be
cryptid.
cool. What about you,
Yeah.
Sarah?
Oh man, are there any that can just that have abilities to turn things into gold, or like how can I bank on this in my year of relaxation?
Right.
Yeah,
That's
I'm
true.
not really sure. I want to fly, maybe something
That's
flying.
what I was thinking. Like
Yeah,
something with wings for sure.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I could be Mothman, screech at people, just like
That's true.
fly around. I don't want to be
You could
like
be
a
a
harbinger of
thunderbird.
doom, though. So
Well, they're not always. See, that's the thing with Mothman. He isn't always a harbinger of doom. So you could be Mothman and
yeah,
change the narrative.
that's true.
Interesting.
Mothman 2.0. Just gotta. How about you, Marissa? Anything top of mind?
I would definitely fly. I would definitely love to be some sort of lake creature or ocean creature so that I can be just swimming all day and maybe see the depths of the ocean that most humans can't reach. That
Oh,
could be cool.
terrifying. That's. I don't know about that.
Sarah, I love how we're on opposite ends of the spectrum in terms of fear. Like, you walk into like underground tunnels and stuff for fun, and I'm just like, no, what?
Yeah, and you just no the bottom of the ocean where everything's like a ghostly white blob and mysterious creatures. I don't think so.
Yeah. But what if you're the mysterious creature?
I can still have anxiety. Doesn't cure that.
Okay, so this one might be even harder. But if you could choose to create your own cryptid, what combinations would you choose?
Okay. Creating my own cryptid. So it would be it would be cool to have one that is like a Wendigo because it's terrifying. It's absolutely
Yeah.
terrifying. And I think that that's a cool aspect of any cryptid, just one that's completely shocking.
Mhm.
So I would say a cross between like a Wendigo and I mean, the Jersey Devil flies, so that's also adding an extra element. I don't like things that fly. That like freaks me out. Like butterflies actually freak me out.
No.
They do. They do.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, like I went to a butterfly house in Alliance at Beach Creek or whatever, and it was a nightmare because they're like,
Oh, no.
yeah. Anyway, so
I don't
that you
think I've
add
ever heard
that.
that sentence in my life. These
I know.
butterflies, they were terrifying.
They are.
Wow. Is it because you can't
Yeah.
predict their movements? Are they too fluttery? This
It's because they get too close to my face. They could be around my
Ah.
face, and that freaks me out. That's why spiders, I'm scared of spiders, but I'm absolutely terrified if they are at eye level or above because they could fall on my
Oh,
head.
yeah.
Mm.
Yep.
So I think that that's it. But so a Wendigo with wings. So you got the hooves, the horns, and the wings. So maybe that is kind of like the Jersey Devil. Maybe the Jersey
Interesting.
Yeah.
Devil just is the ultimate cryptid. I don't.
Oh, man.
Interesting. It's okay. So when we were talking about the Jersey Devil, we were like hearing mixed results that people are saying he's either 3 to 4 feet tall or 6 feet tall. Do you have any like? Do you want to weigh in on that? Do you have any?
Uh, I've always envisioned him in the smaller realm.
Yeah, just a little guy. Yeah.
Yeah, because just a little guy. Because I mean, if you think about some of the origin story, the idea is he's born,
Yeah.
so he's gonna be little anyway. So what is then? He morphs into a 6 foot tall. He just ages maybe
Yeah.
and grows up. I don't know. That sounds. I just always envision him as a smaller creature.
Yeah.
But I don't. Yeah, I don't know. Smaller. I'm going with smaller. As far as the reports that I have read from, especially like the early 1900s, I don't recall anything like being them really mentioning a massive stature in it.
Yeah.
So I would still go with the smaller version then, because if he was bigger, that would certainly be something they'd add to their report.
Yeah. That makes
just
sense.
think if he had butterfly wings, whew, just
Oh man, what
my
a
God.
nightmare! What a nightmare!
oh man.
This is a revelation. I feel like I'm never gonna look at butterflies the same. Okay, so final question. Do you have a favorite cryptid origin story?
Man, cryptid origin stories. So lately I've really been into the looking into Goatman stories. But Goatman as an entity has a ton of different origin stories, so it's hard to just pin down one.
Could you give, us and our listeners just a quick synopsis of who and what is Goatman and the Goatman stories?
So Goatman, there's Goatman stories all over the United States as far as that goes. There's one in Maryland. I think the most famous one for where we are is the Poplick monster down in Kentucky, right outside of Louisville.
Yeah.
He is on the train trestle. I say, and I haven't heard anybody argue against it, that he's the most like dangerous cryptid, the one with the highest body count.
Oh wow.
And I say that because legend trippers go up to the train trestle looking for him, and the Poplick train trestle has no sides to it, and it's massive across a creek, and many people have died because it's an active train trestle. Once you're up there, you have nowhere to go. So when I was there a couple years ago, there actually was a memorial for I think she was only 16. She and a couple friends had gone up for just for fun, and the train came and they couldn't get off the bridge.
Oh god, that's awful.
Yeah, so anyway, but there's that, and then in Denton, Texas, or Alton, Texas, I should say. No, wait, Denton, Texas, it's the old Alton Bridge. There's a goat man there. But the stories range from, I mean, it's the idea of, like, if you think of Pan, what Pan looks like, half man, half satyr, goat-ish, that's Goat Man, except Goat Man is different from Pan in that he's usually murderous and maybe has an axe or something that he's coming after you. He's very nasty.
Yeah.
But the origin stories vary from something like the one in Texas has a story about a guy that was like a goat farmer, and the KKK had hung him or tried to kill him or something, and then this morphs into this legend of he comes back as a goat man. There's stories about like circus freaks that the train derailed and then it got loose Like
Right.
that's around Poplick, um, or other means of men having relations with animals, and then we have this hybrid. So,
Yeah.
um, but as far as like, I mean, because this is difficult in that all of the cryptids except in my mind the Jersey Devil, at least what's immediately coming to mind, all of the cryptids have multiple stories, like in sightings, so the stories can vary as to how they came about. The Jersey Devil, I guess it's kind of convoluted, but it's still the same story sort of at its heart, that it was this
Yeah.
creature that was born and came about, where like Goatman, like I said, has that. Wendigos, again, interesting story because they come from a human that could not refrain from cannibalism. So, but I wouldn't categorize that as my favorite story either.
Yeah.
um yeah, that is tough because I can't think of, like, of the origin stories that I've heard, one where I'm like, oh, that's really endearing, so it sticks with me.
Right. Yeah.
No love stories there that I can think of.
Oh man. Yeah, the Wendigo and Skinwalkers, those really stand out to me in terms of how terrifying they are, because just that malevolent sort of reputation that they have, and how
Yeah.
people, have so many sightings, and the sightings are linked with either disappearances or attacks or being chased. Like that is, yep, they seem aggressive.
Yes.
So I don't like that.
Yeah, exactly. Those are the cryptids that, if you could even put them in a cryptid category, that um, you don't hear good stories. You don't hear good things about them.
Yeah.
So,
So in terms of cryptids within the United States, there are so many big ones, right? There are the ones that we talked about and that have sightings across each state. But what I'm curious is about, how do you feel about these like hyper local cryptids? So ones that just, affect one town, or there's just like a small culture around it and how they just grow. Um, do you feel like it's more of just like urban legends that people tell each other? Do you think people are actually spotting these like little unknown cryptids? Like, how do you feel about those, smaller tier ones?
um, so those ones are my favorite
Yeah.
because they're unique. They have their own lore associated with them, that it's not as widespread. That kind of stuff is where my interest really is, to find the lesser known cryptids. But when you start looking at a broader scope of the lesser known cryptids, there's usually a pattern somewhere. It's not like the Dover demon, for example, was seen over a very short period of time. But if you look at lore that precedes white settlers, there's lore
Hmm.
of creatures that resemble the Dover demon. That would be around waterways, which is where, I mean, that wasn't far from a waterway and things like that. So none of these really, I mean, there are some really. I was talking with a fellow researcher out of Pennsylvania recently about Veggie Man, which Veggie
Oh,
Man, West
okay.
Virginia cryptid. Okay. Very, he's a one shot deal as far as I know. He was more like an alien type entity, that a- attached himself. There was a hunter out in the woods, and he attached himself to him and like sucked the blood out of him through his fingers, I believe, like suction cup like fingers. And then he left. He didn't kill the guy. He just needed to feed, I guess. Um, but the description that he has, like if you look up the Veggie Man now, like go to Etsy or something and type it in, you're gonna find cute drawings of this thing that's like made of vegetables.
That's exactly what
Um,
came to mind. I'm like, a
yeah,
vegetable. Okay.
right, yeah. And that's fine. Like it's cute and it works, and that's what he's seen as now. But if you go to the original sightings, he doesn't really look like that. Um, he isn't my area of study, but my friend that I've been talking to in PA has been studying him pretty heavily, and he has noticed a correlation between the Veggie Man and different type of like I want to say like Fae, but larger
Mm.
Fae, overseas. So even with something that is a one-off thing here and is pretty unique to us doesn't mean that it doesn't exist somewhere else.
Yeah.
They just have a different name for it.
Mm.
So that's kind of like, I mean, squonk. If you've looked into squonk at all, have you heard of it? You just
Name.
laugh.
No.
You're like,
Love the name. I
squonk.
I
What the heck?
haven't.
Okay, so squonk is this little, like, I keep looking around like I could just pull up a picture of him or something. It's very possible, but I don't have a
I can
book
always
with him in it.
superimpose some pictures of these
Okay.
for the edit, so we can have some
Okay.
references. Yeah.
Well, squonk is like this pig-looking thing with saggy skin, and he's crying all the time. And he
Oh, no.
lives in the he lives in the woods in PA. And as far as I'm aware, only there. And he cries all the time because he's ugly. You know that he's around because you'll find puddles of water when it hasn't been raining or anything. And if you follow the puddles, you'll find him. If he knows that he's been seen, he just cries until he dissolves because he's just so
Oh.
sad that he was seen because he's so ugly.
I just want to hug this little guy. Like,
Right.
then I don't want
Yeah.
him to dissolve into nothing.
Right, exactly. So squonk is one that I think the original story that was published was like the early 1900s, that he was in a book. It was about the lumber woods in PA, and just a very localized thing. But then what I've watched over the last 2 or 3 years is he started to get talked about in the cryptid community a little bit more, to where my friend Lisa Russell, who runs Cryptid Comforts, she does like stuffed, I do have one of her things right here. This is the little Van Meter visitor. She makes
Aw.
little plushies of different cryptids.
That's great.
She got attached to the squonk and wrote a little children's book about him. And then this fall, she's actually putting on Squonkapalooza in PA.
Wow.
That's amazing.
And squonk has had this like resurgence 100 years later,
Wow.
because he caught the attention of someone in the community and they just, ran with it. And so the first Squonkapalooza is this August. I can't remember the exact date right now, but it's in PA, and Squonk's going to be everywhere. But yeah, now everybody loves him. They all want to hug him.
Yeah.
Everybody wants to say, "Oh, buddy, it's okay. Looks don't matter."
That's so. But I do love that. It's like a local, state, and city pride. Like your
Mhm.
area. Who is your cryptid? Who can you like really embrace? And I find it fascinating too, as you mentioned earlier, how across the globe you can find very similar stories, and from a time whenever we didn't have mass communication and the internet and ways to talk to each other, but all of these similar things pop up, called different things, but it's very coincidental if there isn't like some sort of like causation behind it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that when you see those similarities, I always see it as speaking to us as humans and kind of what grabs our attention and always has.
Mm.
Yeah.
Because even with regional things that are today, a lot of them you can find shadows of them in historical context as well. So it's not like we just made them up. They've been around for a while.
Yeah.
We were just talking about that yesterday when we were just doing like a quick intro into cryptids in the US, and we were talking about the origins and how just dating back to Egypt, and how this one queen was sending people across the Red Sea, they've never explored it before, to gather animals that they've never seen.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how like kind of the, cryptids were, how it came to be in that sense, is because they've never seen these animals before. So they found a giraffe, but they called it a long-necked dragon.
Yeah.
So it's just like all of these kind of, things that have happened in history that you could, when you go back into it. And we were talking a lot about cryptozoology and how fascinating that is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Giraffes in Rome, the Latin for it literally is camel leopard. For a giraffe, which
Very
makes
accurate,
sense if you think
I would
about
say.
it. Because, it's got the spots. And,
for real.
Wow. Okay.
But the Romans were the same when they would have their
it
massive
gives
games.
some credence to
They would
cryptids as well when you have
go
these
overseas. Well, I
stories
guess
of
say
us
overseas.
seeing unknown animals and just doing our best to describe them. We could be doing that very same thing right now. there's something that
Right.
exists. We don't have great evidence, but we know it's there. So we're doing our best using all our little schemas and ideas to point to what it could be.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what the ancient Romans used to bring animals from all these exotic territories into the arena for their games, and then hunt them. They say that some of some of the animals were hunted to extinction because they were overzealous with bringing them over to hunt.
Yeah.
Hmm.
But you know, the things that are more, I mean, more common to us, that when we have TV access to media and things,
Yeah.
or zoos, so we can
Mm.
see
Yeah.
stuff from wherever.
Yeah.
But back then, those were monsters. They were
Yeah.
Right.
Growing
um,
up, I had a fascination with the thylacine, the Tasmanian tiger. I was
mhm.
heartbroken to know it didn't exist, but if you saw it in the wild, it's
It
it's
did
a
exist, though.
it did, but
Yeah,
it's extinct now.
yeah,
And but if someone saw it, it's a marsupial with a big, mouth with pointy teeth and a striped
yeah,
tail. It's like, okay, that just looks like a chimera of things shoved together,
yeah. Like a platypus is weird.
Yes,
Mm.
absolutely. Yeah.
What is that? I mean,
Right.
it's just a mix of all kinds of stuff. So
Hmm.
yeah, it's not, and that's just going purely physical. With some of these creatures that are in the cryptid world, they take on a more supernatural type element, and then all physicality goes out the window anyway. Anything that would
Yeah.
make sense.
Right.
So
Yeah. Yeah, we were talking about that, the different definitions of cryptids and how some are more like spiritual, religious in nature, and some are more mythology. Some have like different bases in just like actual, you know, science and genetics in the natural world, and how they've just created different sects. Is there ways that you describe these compared to each other? Say like fae compared to, some of these demons and, spirits and things like that.
yeah, so cryptids, I mean, it's like cryptozoology is literally the study of unknown animals. So if you go on a very literal sense, it would have to be a physical animal.
Yeah.
So I would think of something like Bigfoot. I mean, Mothman falls into that, but also when people describe Mothman, they're talking about a humanoid with
Yeah.
wings, which is still an animal. Um, but the Fae, the lines get blurry
Yeah.
because when you get into Goatman and Pan, things like that, there's an association with the Fae.
Hmm.
So they start crossing boundaries at that point. But if I were to think of Fae, I would think of not just the little fairies that, Tinkerbell type stuff, but, gnomes, and they're not all small either, but like the Huldafolk in Iceland, like
Yeah.
there's these, they're little human type things,
Right.
but they don't reveal themselves unless they want to be seen.
Hmm.
Mhm.
I don't I I don't know how many people accidentally can see a fae,
Yeah.
without them wanting that to be a thing. But I wouldn't put them in the realm of cryptid because I don't know as if you can grab a fae. I don't know if you'd want to grab
Yeah.
a fae. I've always heard you don't mess with fae.
Yeah.
Um, and then demons are another thing. When you get into demons, that one's complicated because what is a demon exactly? I feel like by using the term demon, you're already throwing religion into it.
Right.
Hmm.
And I think that that's tricky because, I mean, we can have an idea of what a demon is, but I don't know as if seeing it through a religious lens is necessarily the way that it is.
Sure.
Um, and then what other things might fall into that category?
Yeah.
Because some people would say, like, the Jersey Devil's like a demon.
Hmm.
But it's not what we would traditionally think of right now as a demon that might appear. And then do they
Hmm.
show themselves physically, like ghosts? And there's different realms of ghosts. You've got the poltergeists, you've got the shadow figures, you've got the doppelgangers. There's just so many subgenres. But and then that's not even touching on aliens. So
Hmm.
Yeah.
but
Right.
they're all in the weird, and the thing that I cannot understand as a researcher, looking through all the depths, the breadth of weirdness, another weird thing that this shows us about humans is that we're really good at almost like tribalism when it comes to things,
Hmm.
where people will be, okay, Bigfoot exists. I'm 100% positive, but there's no way that Mothman could exist,
Hmm.
because they go
Right.
straight physical. Or I believe in UFOs, but I don't believe in ghosts.
Hmm.
And it gets nasty, like the infighting that occurs. There's infighting that occurs even within the communities that believe in the same thing. I've
Yeah.
seen it with the most recent one that I've noticed was like the Dogman community. When people start talking about Dogman, it gets vicious as far as what people believe, and I'm right and you're wrong, and they start bickering with each other. And I don't want to say from the outside, because I guess I'm in this world, but from just a researching perspective, it's baffling to me why we even bother to fight that kind of thing when we none of us know.
Right.
And
Yeah.
in the larger scheme of things, we're such a small piece. It's like fighting over an anthill or something. It doesn't make any sense, but we do
Yeah.
that everywhere. I've seen it in academia when I was there. It was even within the language department. The
Hmm.
modern languages were not fans of Latin and Greek, because ultimately you're fighting over funding. So,
Right.
well, my language is more important than yours. Spanish is more important than Italian. Let's look at where we live, kind of thing, which
Yep.
is more useful. And we turn on each other. And that's no different when it comes to the weird, because people are people and we can't
Hmm.
Yep.
escape that.
So, going off of that, and just a bit of a segue into maybe like the culture around cryptids, because you're right. I'm sure there's a lot of infighting. People get very defensive, but on the other
Mhm.
hand, like you were talking about with Squonk, I think there's some sort of like resurgence of people's interest in the paranormal and cryptids, because I feel like maybe the late 80s, early 90s, there was some kind of a spike. I feel like people kind of dropped off, and now again I'm noticing that there's more and more, cultural fascination with it, and events, and just
Mhm.
people just really wanting to embrace this all over again. Do you find that to
Yeah.
be true?
Yeah. I've noticed. So when it comes to Bigfoot, and this may be just when I became aware of stuff, I guess, more outside of my own, just because of the age that I was at the time and what was going on in my life. But when Finding Bigfoot came out, that seemed to be a huge resurgence of then interest in Bigfoot. It's not that he ever
Yeah.
disappeared, it's just people weren't talking about it as openly. And the
Mm,
same thing with ghosts. When Ghost Hunters came out, I think I was in high school ish, middle school, something like that, when Ghost Hunters came out, with the original Taps crew. And then all of a sudden, scare tourism becomes a thing, and they start
yep.
opening up these buildings for overnight ghost hunts, and now it's exploded.
Hmm.
Hmm.
um, and communities are using that, I think, wonderfully as a way to preserve things. When it comes to ghost hunting, they're preserving these buildings, these
Hmm.
historical buildings that otherwise can't be fixed. They can't be saved without a massive amount of money put into them to be used as something else. So they're
Hmm.
able to keep them open and keep the history alive, and then also add, whether you want to or not, this is the nature of the way things are, add lore to it as you go.
Hmm.
So it's like creating its own myth as it goes. And when it comes to cryptids, like Squonkapalooza, I think is great just because of they're rallying around this cryptid that nobody really talked about prior to a couple years ago. But if you look at something like Mothman Festival that's in Point Pleasant, the sheer number of people that come every year, the injection into the economy in the
Hmm.
local community
Yeah.
is massive. And to have that, now they have the world's only Mothman museum. They've got the statue with the
Yep.
butt that everybody wants to touch. Um, and like people come from all over to visit Point Pleasant, West Virginia. But why would they come if not for Mothman? Like if they hadn't
Hmm.
attached to that and really boosted it, I don't know where that town would be right now.
Yeah.
Um, it might look very similar to any other town that we see along the Ohio River as we're like driving up what is
Right.
that, Route 7?
Hmm.
Um, and they're just abandoned. They're just falling apart. But you find a monster and you can get people to also step away from reality for a minute in like our everyday reality that is just pressure and go, go, go. And for a minute, you can think more like a younger version of yourself. You can kind of suspend your disbelief a little bit and just be a kid again for a minute. I think that there's a lure to that as well. Or if it's something that's scary, people like being scared but safely, knowing that
Yes,
it's haunted houses that you go into around Halloween. You know that you're going to walk right out the other side in 10 minutes. So let's go for a quick scare right now. I'm not actually in danger.
Right.
I think that there's an allure to that as well. And then other people that are interested in like the history and stuff, like me, it's just a deeper dive into who we are as people. But
Yeah, it's almost like a combination of, anthropology and historical studies, but also this sort of magic that we lose as we start to get older. And like you said, that suspension of disbelief that you can embrace that. Um,
yeah.
So yeah, I absolutely love seeing. I've never been to the Mothman Festival, but I plan to because got to touch the butt. But also I just want to.
Yeah, the shiny hiney. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely.
Yeah.
But even something as local as Monster Fest coming up, which is
Yeah.
created by Small Town Monsters, correct?
Yes. Yeah. So on June 3rd, we are putting on a festival called Monster Fest. And we'll cover, the idea of Monster Fest, you're covering all kinds of monsters, which kind of fits with what we do as Small Town Monsters. We have Bigfoot, but we've got Mothman, and we've got UFOs, and we've got the Jersey Devil and the Bell Witch. Chupacabra is coming. We cover a lot of stuff. And basically what Monster Fest is going to allow, which a lot of these festivals do, it brings the community together, this little weird community that we have, and we all come together and we support each other.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying that there's not drama within the community, because like earlier I said there is.
Yeah.
But when it comes to things like festivals, the sheer amount of kindness that I see is unreal. Whether it's as simple as when people are setting up, you'll see somebody trying to come in the door and you just run over and open the door for them, even if you don't know who they are, to people going around and just buying a little something from every table, or just giving them a compliment, sharing them on social media. The support within the community is unreal, and that is something special that I haven't really seen as vividly in other arenas. And I don't know if that's just because we all know we're weird and we've all been used to being outcasts in certain ways, and so now all these misfits are together.
Absolutely.
Or what. But yeah, at Monster Fest we're gonna have like the vendors, a lot of vendors. We're gonna have speakers. The night before at Canton Palace Theater, we're gonna premiere On the Trail of Bigfoot, Land of the Missing, which is focused around Sasquatch stories coming out of Alaska. And yeah, we've got lots of special guests that are coming as well. And I'm trying to think. Oh, we have a live podcast recording room that's going to be going on. It's going to be a lot of moving pieces, all crammed into a day on June 3rd at the Doubletree in downtown Canton.
Yeah, I know myself. I am absolutely planning on attending. I'm very close in the area, so Monster Fest June 3rd in Canton, Ohio, and the premiere of Bigfoot Land of the Missing the night before at the historic Canton Palace Theater. So if you've never been to the Palace Theater and you're from the area, highly recommend, because it's a beautiful building they restored. And I assume we can put some links to tickets in our show notes, so that way if people are interested or around, they can check it out. Also some Small Town Monsters films and productions on these show notes as well, because truly you guys make some fantastic stuff. And even in this episode now, I've learned at least 3 new things, so I definitely appreciate the insight.
Same. I've been trying to like play it cool when you guys have been dropping names of cryptids, and I'm like, oh yeah, I've heard of that before. Meanwhile, I'm like keeping a list to Google later, like I don't know what that is.
Yeah. So literally the the friend that I was talking about earlier out of PA, that's a fellow researcher, earlier today mentioned to me something called octo squash. And I'm like, you're kidding. That's not like, what? And he's like, yeah, it's a story out of France of this little like furry octopus looking thing, I guess, that was going across the road. This is one of those one-off cryptids.
Yeah.
Going across the road, and construction workers or something were coming in their truck. The light shined on it. He said it lifted up its little one of its furry little tentacles to like shield itself from the light. They stopped the truck and then they tried to beat it to death.
Oh, okay. That took a turn.
Right? Yeah, I know. I'm like, what? Why would you do that?
Oh my.
But the point that it's like a furry octopus that's walking across the road in France. Come on now.
I love it.
Yeah. I'm like, it's
Wow.
adorable. I'll pet it
Yeah.
too.
Yeah. Yes. I would have tried to pet it for sure.
Incredible. Wow.
Well, really, thank you for being on the show. Honestly, I've learned so much.
Yes.
Squonk, like that alone blows my mind. I never thought I'd have empathy 100% for a cryptid, but I think Squonk, I wish I was closer to Pennsylvania for Squonkapalooza because I would be in.
Yeah.
Yeah, but thank you really for being on the show.
Absolutely.
Anytime you want to come back and chat,
Absolutely.
this has been a blast for me. So
Incredible. We
Yeah,
have an
I'll
entire
come back
season to
whenever.
wrap up too, so we would love to have you back.
Yeah, I'll come back whenever. I'm down.
Fantastic. Awesome.
awesome.
For Season 2, Not Your Average Bucket List will be exploring local lores and legends throughout the country. So, if you're up for the audio adventure, follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.